Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever in the world that you are joining us. It's hard to believe that we're actually in the last week of February 2023. It seems like just a couple of moments ago, I was ringing in the new year. A new year that I was hoping would ring in with the more partnerships, more communications, more collaborations. And I think it's going the right way because my discussion today on In the Node is about exactly that: partnerships and collaborations. You've heard of the line, right? If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And today we're going to be looking at a very unique relationship between Kaspersky, which is the host of In the Node, and some of their MSP partners. You know, you've often heard me say this: security is about people, process, and technology, and in that order. Shout out to Mark Dillon, Vice President of IT from Innova Power, because he emphasizes in that order. Sure, there's the technology, but there's people behind it and processes that allow for that technology to actually execute on what you expect it to do, successfully at that too. So today, we're going to be exploring just that with two individuals from the MSP community and a guest from Kaspersky as well. Trevor, James, Blake, welcome to In the Node. And I'm going to ask you by calling you and asking you to introduce yourselves and tell me something about your relationship with Kaspersky. Blake, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about what you do, where you work, and your relationship with Kaspersky. Blake?
Hello, thank you for having me, Ali. My name is Blake. I work in Minnesota, and our relationship with Kaspersky is that we are an MSP partner who is utilizing their cloud endpoint solutions. We also utilize their on-premise anti-spam exchange protection solution.
Hopefully you're not having to deal with the ice storm that we're dealing with right now in tropical Toronto. But from your end, I'll take flight to James. James, tell us a little bit about where you're joining us from, your relationship with Kaspersky.
Great, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a Canadian MSP. I'm actually close to the Toronto area. We're in the Waterloo region here. We've been partners with Kaspersky since pretty much our fruition when we kind of did our kickoff. And we use their MDR as one of the solutions we're rolling out to over 200 endpoints to bring the next level of protection to all of our clients. And we have lots of other exciting opportunities where we're going to be growing into some of their other security products and building a bigger relationship with Kaspersky and us.
Fantastic. And you're not too far from where I am located, Waterloo, the tech capital of Ontario, dare I say, of Canada at large. And I know not too far from you is, for his first time ever on In the Node, is Trevor. Trevor, tell us a little bit about what you do at Kaspersky and why is this conversation important to you?
Thanks for having us today. And yeah, I'm very close to where you guys live. I'm also just outside Toronto. I've been with Kaspersky for almost 5 years now, but for the last 11 years, I've been involved with MSPs, and I'm really passionate about the business. I love the business. The reason I love the MSP business is that it's very easy for an MSP to differentiate themselves from their competitors based on how they package services. You know, from a VAR standpoint, you're usually comparing, prices, it's apples to apples. But with the MSP space, you've always got, the advantage of making your apple and orange. And from that standpoint, I love the business and I love working with our MSPs. And I'm happy to be here today and highlight what we're doing with a couple of our MSPs.
Very well said, Trevor. And Trevor and I go a bit of a long way back because of our relationship through South Africa, my cricket love for it, but also Trevor has a bit of a poetic sense to him, as I can sense. And I'm going to probably ask him a little about the art in his background. But Trevor, you said something really important. A mentor of mine once told me that, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And really, this conversation is about, you don't have to necessarily be that singular when you look at certain technologies and tools. It really comes down to how you apply it. So let's use that very important baseline. And James, I'll start off with you, and then we'll board your helicopter and go to Blake in the US. James, tell me a little bit of, in your work, how do you assess who's the right vendor for the services that you're providing? James?
Yeah, so we take a multi-stage approach when we're looking at a vendor or a group of vendors to determine who's the best fit for our clients. And at first starts, you take the bucket of all of the products out there and you take it down to the handful that meet all of the needs that you're looking for. And then the next part that's really important to me is relationships. So I look for the vendor partners who foster relationships over just a one-time sale. And that's a huge part for us. So we go through this multi-stage process. And when we end up at the outset of this, we end up with great partnerships with companies like Kaspersky that they're looking for our success as well as our client success. They're just as committed to seeing both sides work as we are to seeing the relationship grow with our client and with our vendors.
Well said. I know together we can go so far, and I want to just take what you said, James, and change the question a little bit to Blake. Blake, over the last 2 years, and I would say 3 years, we've had something called COVID, and it's definitely changed the way in which services have been delivered, but also how services have been consumed. The same question to James, I want to put to you, but also ask you, along with how you choose your vendors to work with, has COVID impacted those choices in any way?
It's a good question. Well, to first answer the vendor solution selection that we would go through, it's usually communication. Obviously, sales is going to be the highest communication, so we immediately try to slip in a technical support question and see how long it takes for them to get back to us, see if they'll directly connect us with the engineers, or if we have to go through some ticketing system with different tiers. And then it's also pricing. We like to always look at the biggest dog in the neighborhood, who's going to be the most expensive. And then we like to look at, well, who is the underdog? Who's the brand new company to the table? And then we look at everyone in between and compare between those sets of criteria: price, offerings, and experience in the market. As far as COVID and how it's changed things, for anyone in the technology sector, the work from home was a scramble. There was limited hardware available to be able to purchase, to be able to deploy. Getting on site to deploy it where the networks and computers and equipment was of course, a little bit of a challenge if there's no one there to let us in. And so those are the largest hurdles, was getting that equipment out there, but then getting also the remote access for the employees to be able to get into their solutions. And that's somewhere where Kaspersky ties into that, because some solutions, it'll block all remote access. And then some solutions, it's really easy to allow remote access and still keep it secure. Kaspersky is the easy one. I had absolutely no problems migrating everyone over to VPNs and still allowing that traffic from a completely different subnet, the VPN subnet, into the network and allowing them to access those computers, yet still monitoring it. So if we have any rogue connections or anything that's out of the norm, it flags us and sends us that email. We really enjoyed Kaspersky for that.
Well said. And I want to work with that and just make a very quick comment before, Trevor, I put you on the hot seat. So all of you know me as the host for In the Node. In a previous life, I led Security Innovation Center at Durham College, and we were consumers of Kaspersky. For those that are listening in, I am moving now to lead cybersecurity training for a federal agency. More on that very, very soon. And I expect to be looking at more Kaspersky services during that time. But Trevor, with what Blake said, I'll bring you into the conversation. One of the good things about working with you over the last little while is the ability to be upfront with you. I've always said politeness sometimes can be the poison of collaboration. Sometimes you just have to lay it out blunt, flat. This is what I need, and this is how this is how I can operate. Trevor, over the last 2 years, the relationship with the MSPs, how has that evolved? How has that changed? And what have you done to ensure that you're catering to some of their needs?
So I would say, obviously things have changed, the market has changed, and, some of the things that we've done is we've provided maybe enhanced services. So something that has been, boiling for a while now, and we're just launching it, in the next week or two, is our enhanced MSA service for MSPs. And what that is giving MSPs the ability to align their monthly billing with a elevated level of service. With Severity 1, we're providing 24/7. So there's lots of different, things that we've done over the years. So maintenance, we've added a lot of functionality that gives the product a broader appeal to the MSP, where they can take, different, packages that they want to create for their customers. Using our software, they can build the proverbial good, better, best. And, using one piece of software, they have the ability to, roll out different levels of service to their customers. And that has been, I would say it's been, very widely accepted as a good route for MSPs, because now they're learning one type of software, but they have the additional layers of security that they can provide to their customers. And that has been, I would say, over the last, year or two, we've seen a lot of growth in some of our cloud products.
You know what, I've always said this to my teams, it's not just about making it simple, it's about making it seamless. And those integrations with the technology stacks that you have is very, very, very important. Now, I'll add one more point here. It's also important that we're speaking a similar language. And when you work with certain vendors and whatever the relationships are, you've got to make sure that you've got the technical knowledge, but also the process and operational. Often I find that we take certain solutions and then we go looking for the problems later on. Sometimes you need to know what solutions fit for what problems. And I'm being a little high level, but I'm going to dive deeper very, very shortly. I'm going to follow the same cycle and then I'll shift it up a little bit later on. James, I'm going to come back to you in tropical Waterloo. And James, the question for you is, over the last little while, costs an obvious reality, and what costs can our consumers or your partners or your users can consume has shifted dramatically, especially with the onset of 2023, the tech layoffs that we've been hearing about, the shifting economic realities. It's definitely made it challenging for you folks, yourself and Blake, in terms of how you work with your vendors. Straight up question, how do you balance cost against function and features?
Yep, that's a great question. As we know, security is really about walking a very delicate balance between budget and protection. I mean, you can have any protection you want if you have an unlimited budget, which unfortunately in the SMB space just isn't the case. So it's important. And again, I always kind of lean on vendor relationships and vendor partnerships, because those partnerships help drive costs down. So they're able to give us better pricing to help bring the right tools to our SMB customers, especially in trying times like this. And oftentimes, as they're scaling back some of their costs, we have to supplement that with some good security tools to help fill some of those gaps. And partnerships are paramount in being able to bring all of the right tools to the table and to be able to bring those tools at a price that's affordable, especially when you're dealing with a high inflation market and an economic downturn. So I think partnerships is kind of at the core of that. They're the tools that are able to make it possible for us to present this to our clients.
Blake, I'm going to work with what James just said and ask you the same thing, and perhaps even turn it just a little bit. It wouldn't be a session on In the Node if we didn't go slightly off script. To keep you on your toes, Blake, anything different between the Canadian and the US markets, you would say?
That's difficult to answer. I don't have a lot of Canadian customers, but I can tell you that we all are dealing with the same challenges.
Yeah.
We have the same struggles, servers operate the same, networks operate the same, and we all have to deal with users who aren't entirely sure how to read the manual you provide them. So I think, again, partnerships, working with the vendor to provide the correct solution for the right dollar, allows you to be able to come to your client with options and allow them to select the one that fits them best. But it is important that you provide them with adequate security. The last thing you want to do is be the person being pointed at when there's a breach, data loss. And so with Kaspersky, we can have trust in the background of the product. The product's been out for a very, very long time. We have access to all the nooks and crannies and intricacies of how the endpoint protection works and their anti-spam tool. And they've been out for years and years and years. So I don't have any fear that they're going to let me down, like maybe some of the brand new tools that have recently come out from other companies, no-name brands. So that's where I stand. I think we all deal with the same struggles, and there's probably not a lot of differences between Canada and the US.
Yep. Thank you for that. Speaking about, looking at a little bit of research and in-depth analysis of different geographies, Trevor, I'm going to see if you've done your homework. Kaspersky released a really, really interesting report on MSPs and vendor relationships. For those of you that are watching, the link to that report, and I know that the team that's doing the production will also make sure that you actually see the report on your screen, and they'll send you links as well at the bottom with the ticker. I do encourage all of you to read that report. Trevor, in that report and the analysis that you had done, cost was still a major factor in how MSPs pick their vendors. Can you tell us a little bit about how costs have evolved over the recent past?
Yeah, obviously with the difficulties that the markets are experiencing, cost has become more of an issue, I say, in 2023 than it was maybe 3-4 years ago. And you can see the results in the survey. So we did an MSP survey. We surveyed over 500 MSPs, 250 in the US, 250 in Canada. And right across the board, the top few issues that come to mind for these MSPs are cost, and efficacy and support. And from a Kaspersky standpoint, we score really well in those three areas. And I'm happy to say that it gave us good food for thought. But at the end of the day, we were pleased with the results and what we're hearing from the MSPs.
They've always said this, there's no one size solution fits all, and there's no one cost size solution that fits all. And you have to have that ability to be a little malleable when it comes to that. And, having worked with you directly on a couple of opportunities before, I can say that I can vouch for the truth in that report. So thank you for sharing it. And to our audience, again, we will share the links to that report going forward. Blake, I'm going to come back to the US and I'm going to put you on the hot seat again. Blake, what does your typical customer size look like?
One person all the way up to 150 endpoints in a single organization. There's some mom and pop shops we help out. I'd like to push the solution to even home users would be fine with us. Having that reporting is a doorway to additional sales and providing a higher level of support. People will run across infections and they won't even realize it. And when we can come to them and say, hey, did you know you did this? We can then train and educate the end user. So the general size of companies that we like to target is 50 to 100. Those are where the solution really shines for the endpoint antivirus and bringing that cost value to them. If they're previously purchasing things from Walmart or Best Buy, $50 a computer, we can bring that price down significantly and then add in the remote monitoring, the management of it, the email notifications where we can come to their management and inform them of what staff are doing, what they're opening in emails. So that's our typical customer size.
Yeah, Blake, I want to come back to that because you mentioned an interesting dissection, right? You went from 1 to 50 to 100. I will come back to your comments and especially about the one mom and pop shops. James, let's hop over to you. A similar question, but I also want to ask you, what are the challenges in serving, let's say, a smaller group, let's say a team of 5 to 10 versus, let's say, 200 seats that a client may need servicing for? What are some of the challenges that you face there?
Yeah, so obviously we have clients that range over 200. Our average seems to kind of be in that smaller 25 to 75 range. The difference is, ironically, once the tools are in place, there's not a big difference between the smaller shops of under 10 employees versus over 200. If anything, the smaller shops tend to be a little bit easier to work with. Once those tools are in place and the education platforms are running, that they start becoming more savvy with catching the threats and knowing where it's safe to go on the internet and things like that. They tend to become very, very low maintenance users. They tend to not put themselves in a risky spot, and in the off chance they get something that does happen to pop its head, usually having tools like Kaspersky in place just grabs that stuff and it mitigates the threat. So I find the smaller groups are just a little bit easier. It's like trying to move a large crowd versus moving 5 or 10 people. It's easier to move 5 or 10 people than say 200, but at the end of the day, it's just a different journey to get to the same destination.
Absolutely. And I want to work with that just a little bit, talking about journeys. And I want to talk about this knowledge journey. Trevor, I'm going to come to you, but Blake, I want to come back to you just for a moment. You mentioned about, the one-person shop, the two-person shop. And I've always told this to my teams, especially because I do train a few teams in cybersecurity sales, is you got to get the customer to know what they do not know. What's that educational journey like with the smaller shops that just come to you and say, hey, keep us secure? How challenging is it sometimes to work with them and inform them about what they need to know? But also, how does Kaspersky fit into that knowledge mobilization kind of journey?
It's a really good question and a good point. I think the smaller shops have more of an intrinsic investment into the company themselves. And so they have to be more careful, more aware, because they are solely responsible for it. Whereas an employee who's just running the front desk may not quite care and just, I'm just going to open these emails quick. The education's part of it. With the email notifications of a monitored antivirus endpoint solution, we're able to then bring that information to them when they come across it the same day. And we can say, hey, by the way, that thing you did earlier, you remember that? Well, yeah, I was kind of wondering, but nothing happened. Well, right, nothing happened. But it'd be better if you didn't even put yourself in that position. Us seeing these notifications means that we need to train you. And so here's how you can look into this further. They will retain that knowledge a lot better than a large organization where the people are not as invested in the company. Will tell the front desk person at a 50-person company 6 times, hey, remember how we told you? Yeah. They don't care. So that's what James has said. It's very easy to work with a smaller company when they care more, when they're more aware of their surroundings and they've got more of an investment, than working with a plethora of underlings and trying to communicate through their upper management. Hey, so-and-so. Oh yeah, them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always said this across the board, and I teach a lot of incident response courses as well. And it's very hard to put a price on trust. And you're absolutely right. When you're invested in the company on a personal level, there's equity involved, there's stock involved. You've built this from the ground up. The commitment to security, not just from a tech, but a people and process standpoint, can actually be much more stronger. Interesting points, James and Blake and Trevor, back on the hot seat for you. This wasn't on the script, but I know you're going to give us a very interesting response, probably drawing from the report and the research that was done at Kaspersky. Trevor, what does it mean to you when you've got this really dynamic set of clients? You've got large scale, you're looking at 500 plus seats. And then there's also the 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5 seats. And everybody expects a certain level of commitment. How does that factor into your daily work?
So I like to say that, I'll treat all customers the same or all MSPs the same. But our sweet spot for the MSP space is definitely the mid-market. Having said that, one of the things I always tell MSPs is that we'll meet you where you are. So today you might be, a 100-node shop, and you have aspirations to getting to 500 within the next few years. Or you might be a smaller shop where you're starting off with 10 or 20 nodes, and you're going to grow it to 100 nodes, and we'll meet you there. For the folks that are growing into the tens of thousands, we can do that as well. And then obviously, not only the scalability of the numbers of nodes, but you have the ability to, using Kaspersky, to go deep as well. Today you might be doing endpoint protection. In a month's time or 6 months time, you might, do EDR. And moving on from there, you might even get involved in threat intelligence feeds. So from our standpoint, and why I'm so excited about the MSP business is, number one, we can meet you where you are. And number two, we can help you with your journey. Where do you see yourself in the next 2 to 3 years? Can we be a partner? Can we help you get there? And usually the answer is yes.
I've always said this, and you said it ever more eloquently than I could ever have, is cybersecurity is not a destination. It is a journey. And I expected nothing else but a poetic response from you, Trevor. So well said. And I do agree, is that you've got to also know what your sweet spots are. You've got to know when a customer qualifies to use some of your tools. And more importantly, it's really important to know when to say, no, we may not be the right fit. Because I actually value that much more than somebody desperately trying to sell a particular technology stack to me. So thank you, Trevor. Again, like I said before, you can't put a price on trust, and that trust that I've built over the while with you really speaks. So thank you for sharing that, Trevor. Blake, I want to come back to you, and then we'll go to James, and then we have about 15 minutes, so we'll come very close to our landing spot. Blake, how does support factor into all of this? Your customers, maybe the smaller ones, may not necessarily mention SLAs and all of that stuff, but when you're picking the vendor that you want to work with, how do you evaluate their support services? How do you evaluate their engagement when you need their assistance?
There is some specific criteria that we look for when we approach a new vendor. And during the sales period, we immediately ask for their technical support contacts, and we usually send them an email and a phone call. And our goal is to see how fast do they respond, of course, and how well do they respond. If I give them some precursor information, like we've already tried this, if they mention in their response that same set of steps, that's an immediate fail because they clearly are just copy pasting. And I'm not talking to anyone who actually has any knowledge about the program. So that's how we evaluate the support side of things. And we have been just overwhelmingly satisfied with Kaspersky. We can usually get to the same technical support rep. And Trevor will help us elevate those requests immediately to different tiers. So when it's a real priority, it's within an hour. We have our answers.
Fantastic. Talk about within an hour. James, same question to you, but also when you are evaluating a particular vendor from a support perspective, what kind of tools do you need to have as an MSP to also ensure that you can provide that level of support? James?
Yeah, so the same process that we use for vetting vendors for our clients is basically the same thing. So we, from my perspective, we eat at the same table our clients do. We're all in it together. So the solutions that work for our clients, they'll work for our clients because we vet them and try them in-house first. So we put our money where our mouth is. And when we bring in a vendor, we go through questions and answers. We see how the onboarding process is, and you can usually tell how responsive they're going to be, the kinds of feedback you get, the different teams that are brought in together. And you get that feeling when you're kind of doing that in-house testing. And if I walk away from the in-house testing saying, hey, this was a positive experience, I didn't feel like I was being rushed along, and the experience was good and the tools meet all the criteria, I often will run with that for a little bit, and then I will roll those out to my clients. And it's my model has always been, we're all in this together, we're all fighting the same battle. So if it's something that I want to sell, I should passionately believe that it will protect my own business as well as my clients. So usually I start by sampling it first and then sitting at the same table with my clients and rolling it out.
Yeah, and I think creating scenarios, almost like they're doing mock scenarios, running through them, doing those drills, really help you to elevate your own posture and your own support services. So thank you for that, James. Trevor, I want to bring this conversation to you again, because I'm sure we have an audience right now, some who may be evaluating, do they want to also, as an MSP provider, how would they work with Kaspersky, so on and so forth. One of the things that is really important, at least from my perspective, my 2 rupees of thought, is if you're going to choose a particular vendor to work with as an MSP, there's a training component as well. I need to know the product. I need to know much more from the inside. How does training for MSPs factor into the relationship that you've created with James and Blake?
So, I think they can speak to it as well, is that we're always available. So we have high availability in terms of technical resources, sales resources, whatever help, our MSPs need, we're there. And, we have onboarding training, free training that's available in our partner portal. But I think it goes, further than that, because, it's really, I need help right now. I've got X, Y, Z to do. How do I do that? And I think that's where, the access comes in. Do you have open access to resources? And the answer is yes. For those ad hoc questions, it's fine to do the training, go through the motions, but at the end of the day, how quickly can I get support today? Whether it's, from Trevor, whether it's from Alex, whether it's from Andrew, how quickly can I get a response? And, I think both Blake and James have mentioned that we're responsive, and I think that's key.
Yeah, and to everyone listening, I know we've got a broad spectrum in the audience. It's not just speed; it is responsiveness. Responding and saying, I've received this and that's it, is definitely not a form of support. But responding and saying, we've received this, we are investigating, we expect a response back within 60 minutes or whatever have you, really does build that trust and does allow you to ensure that there are 3 layers of communication here. You, the MSP, and whoever is the service consuming the service. Creating that clarity of communications is so important. And I've said this so many times before, and I'm sure Blake and James would also agree with this. From a support perspective, it's one thing to know your tech, but it's another thing to be a technician who can communicate well. And that establishes so much confidence when folks consume certain services, especially in security. So Trevor, thank you for sharing that perspective as well. We've got about one more question and then some closing comments. Blake, I'm going to come to you, then we'll go to James and then Trevor. Blake, from a SLA perspective, how does that factor into the relationships that you have with Kaspersky and the customers that you service as well?
As James has mentioned as well, we like to vet the product in-house. And so we should know it through and through. We should have it deployed on our own workstations and servers. And so when a customer comes to us with a question, we usually can answer it off the cuff, so to speak. As far as the training that we receive, it's so easy to get your hands on it and to go through it. The quizzes are super helpful. They're really spot on for knowing the stuff. We like to push our employees through that, and that usually covers pretty much everything that we'd get a question from our clients on. The SLA, we offer all of our clients, managed or not, in the Kaspersky software or not, usually a 1 to 3 hour response time with on-sites within 24 hours of contact. We've been around for 13 years. We've got over 4,000 clients in our books. So we find that that is the sweet spot. People can't be down. They can't have their technology not working. And fortunately, we don't get a lot of support requests about Kaspersky. It just works.
It just works and it does what it's expected to do. That's a dream kind of relationship. James, I want to ask you the same question, and then we'll go around about this. And it's a question that I dealt with recently at the CISO forum at which Kaspersky was at as well. Is along with your SLAs, along with all of that, there's also this question of insurance, and the insurance market has shifted significantly. How does cyber insurance, factor into the services that you're providing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll be honest, it's one that comes at a really good time. So as we found, insurance companies are certainly adapting to all of the new threats that are out there. And inevitably, the requirements for cyber insurance are increasing. And even in the MSP space, cyber insurance is a very difficult thing to kind of acquire. We've recently had to increase our insurance to a very high level for some of our clients. And so we've had to reevaluate the tool set and the things that we have with our insurance carrier and say, hey, these are the things. And we're happy to say that the Kaspersky tool set that we're protecting our environment with and our clients' environment with have met or exceeded all of the requirements that have come up from that regard. So while we were able to provide fast response times for our clients, if ever there's something when it comes into the security wheelhouse, we know that we're typically getting fast responses from Kaspersky that tie in with our SLAs. And we also know that the tools that we're rolling out help tick all of those boxes. That's fast response, it's fast integration, it ties well to gaining cyber insurance because you do hit a lot of the security boxes and questions that they ask in single tool sets often.
Fantastic points. And I will just throw this little caveat in for our audience that's listening. At the CISO forum, which we were all at some time ago, one of the things that I learned from the CISO of Equifax is, and this is just a general comment, is sometimes the tools that you might be using for certain services also have to be shared with your insurance provider. So that if that tool is approved, so on and so forth, there are certain nuances that are starting to emerge in how you procure cyber insurance and how cybersecurity insurance is delivered to you. And it's very, very important to have those conversations with your MSP, with your vendors, so on and so forth, so that you're letting your customers know what you genuinely know. Trevor, I want to bring you now into this conversation. Cyber insurance. Usually you don't see the vendors necessarily or product vendors necessarily talking about it. It's now becoming a very big conversation, especially after Lloyd's made that determination on acts of war not being covered, so on and so forth. How is the cyber insurance conversation featuring into your daily discussions with MSPs and with users in general?
I'm hearing more about it now than I did before. It is coming up. As James mentioned, we do check the box because we can't provide EDR solutions and MDR solutions. So I think moving forward, it's obviously going to be, a major factor in terms of, how services are delivered and, the protection around those services. Obviously, the cyber protection is required. But I'm just getting into those conversations now, so I don't have a lot of anecdotal things that I can share right now, but I am hearing a lot more now.
Absolutely, and I'm in exactly the same boat as you are. And I've told this to a lot of people that this is such a new area of research, a new area of practical application that you need to put in the work. I mean, the dictionary is the only place where success comes before work. You've got to put in the work to understand the cyber insurance space and how it fits into the services you're consuming, or the services that you're providing, or the vendor relationships that you have established. There is no getting away from that. And I'm seeing this as a consistent theme across multiple conferences. Cyber insurance, not just as a topic of where do I buy it from, but how do I understand what I consume when I consume cyber insurance. So thank you for that. We're coming very, very close to the final few minutes of our session. And I want to bring us to a concluding remark. Success, it's best served when it's shared. Blake, let's start off with you. What advice would you have for any MSP that's looking to get into, let's say, a vendor relationship with Kaspersky? What are some tips that you would like to share with them?
An MSP that wanted to approach Kaspersky, they should get a hold of Trevor. Trevor's been so wonderful to work with. I'm sure anyone that they get set up with by going through the general channels, like we didn't know Trevor before we met him. You'll be given someone who's on point and is well-trained. So I think that would be the tip. I would look into it. Definitely compare Kaspersky to whatever solution you're using right now. They'll give you a free trial. They're really easy to talk to. The support's really easy to get a hold of. You're missing out if you don't evaluate all of the options out there in the market. And a name that's been around that long is definitely one that you should be aware of.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Name and trust. Those are two very important things that you want to look at. James, from your book of advice, what would you like to share with our audience around if they're looking to get into this space? What are some things that they need to be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so it's important to start with getting your products that are going to tick the boxes. That's obviously the key starting point. But the part that a lot of people kind of miss is the relationship piece. And that's ultimately what it really comes down to. You may find a lot of products will tick the boxes that you're looking for, but what they don't necessarily have on the back end are support folks like Trevor and the team that is behind him and supporting that product, and the fast responses and the support in rolling out these products, and even to be able to get the best pricing you can for your clients to make sure that they're getting the best in class product at a fantastic price that meets their budget. So my advice is to make sure that when you're vetting these products, you sit down and you talk to the partners, because at the end of the day, the relationship piece can be that part that makes a good product great, or a good product and just make it okay. And I think relationships is key.
Absolutely. And I think that mentioning of relationships also, the touch points that you have with the vendor, the meetings that you have, the reviews that you have, and the honest feedback that is provided, and how that feedback is actioned. Trevor, in your role, how do you ensure that feedback that you're getting from MSPs, how do you ensure that you're incorporating that into the Kaspersky service offering?
So, like I said earlier, we're launching this new MSA for MSPs, and that has been it's a result of listening to what MSPs are saying to us. And if folks want to get the link, I'd be happy to share it with them. But it is, a significant, move from where we are today in the standard way we support MSPs to this new platform or this new program. The other thing I did want to mention, and just along the same lines that, Blake and James had been, talking about, I think one of the key things is, one thing is checking the boxes on the efficacy of the product. That's one thing. The relationship is another thing. The third thing, which I think is really important, is the business model. Does the business model work for you? Without saying much about anything else, I would say that we are well primed for MSPs to work with you in a way that makes sense to you. Whether it's our monthly model, whether it's our annual model, whether it's adding this MSA to the monthly model, whatever it is, it's the business components that need to make sense before you make a decision. And I think that's where we shine, is being able to meet the partner where they are, and being able to provide enough flexibility that their business is not suffering because of the way we want to do business. We come to them, and it's a real partnership in how, we're going to work together with our partners.
I know there's so much more that we could dive into, and perhaps a follow-up session as well, because there's the geography of where you're providing the services. There's what's the audience age range in some cases. There's so many different things that factor into how you move into the space. And certain advice that you've provided really has got me to think about not just understanding the technology, the relationships, so on and so forth, but actually trialing and testing those technologies in certain sandboxes, seeing what works, what doesn't, and sharing that with your consumers. I think that openness, that transparency, all builds a very, very trusting relationship when you're providing services. And I've said this all the time to a lot, and I get approached by a lot of members of the vendor community and MSP community. And for me, it's always a good sign when if there's something that they don't know and they say, we'll come back to you on it. And there's a process behind that that really adds a lot of value in terms of how you move forward. It's not just about the sale alone, it is about the relationship. Trevor, James, Blake, I know we could have continued this conversation for so much more longer, but I really appreciate that this was our first foray in the Knode into the MSP vendor relationship here at Kaspersky. And more importantly, for the audience that's listening, that report, that research report, once we share it with you, take a look at it. And if you are looking to become a partner with Kaspersky, you are looking to do some of the work similar to what James and Blake does, reach out to Trevor, reach out to James and Blake, and I'm sure they'll share much more with you, and you never know what partnerships may result from it. One thing that I learned from this session, that it's truly, truly great what we can achieve if we don't care who takes the credit. And over here you saw Kaspersky talking about their vendor community, about their partners, the partners talking about Kaspersky. At the end of the day, if you've delivered successfully a security service, that's what matters. And I really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you, Blake, James, and Trevor for taking the time. My name is Ali Hirji, your host of In the Knode. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and keep warm. Take care, everybody.